Hello. I'm currently studying for an MRes, which is a Masters by Research, using letters mostly written by my great-great-grandfather and his brothers, and most of them were written to either one another or written home to their father. And they were at sea for quite a bit of their lives. They grew up on a farm, Nether Onston, which is on the south shore of the Stanislaw. And they went to the whaling, and then sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly, a number of them went into the navy, and some of them went into the merchant shipping. So they wrote letters home, and it gives us a wee insight into what was going on. So it's quite nice. So here we go. Start here. Letters from below decks, because there weren't officers, any of these people. Now here's the family tree. It shows me and my sisters at the bottom here, and my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents. And then there are Nicholas' family. John here was the eldest, so he was going to inherit the farm, so he stayed at home working the farm. Isabella, or Isabella as it was pronounced at the time, is typical for that time. We don't hear an awful lot about her, or the mother Margaret, but that's the way things go in historical documents. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, the John Smith, sometimes known as John Smith of New York, he had a little ship trading on the east coast of America, but we'll maybe go into him a bit more in a future video shortly. In the meantime, back to Nichol and his brothers. The state of the documents is sometimes quite good. As you can see, this document here, it's quite easy to read once you get your eye in. But I've got to remember they're writing as they would have spoken. So one of them was coming into Aberdeen, and he mentions Aberdeen with an E at the front, as it is pronounced, or as it was pronounced at the time, and up until quite recently actually people pronounced it like that. And then the number after 11 is 12. I can remember my grandparents' generation talking about 12 as a number. So I've got to keep those in mind. Some of the documents aren't so nice, like this one here. As you can see, there's bits missing, and it's faded, and the thing itself is a bit dirty, it's a bit difficult to read. So I'm bearing in mind that I'm lucky to have any documents at all, and I'm trying not to be too upset that I have some that are difficult to read. What can you do? The first letter from Nichol is from on board HMS Lynx. This is a picture here of HMS Lynx. This painting was done about 7 years before Nichol joined them. This is a picture of them capturing 4 Danish ships. Apparently that's Lynx in the middle there. But he writes home in January 1801. I have sent 2 letters to you to let you know where I was, but I have never had any answers, which makes me very unhappy. Well, it would. And given that everyone was so good about sending letters at the time, I was wondering if perhaps, you write a letter, you'd have to give it to an officer or some such to get it in the postal system, and whether the first few letters maybe weren't delivered. And I found another source of letters from someone who was pressed on board another ship in roughly the same time in history. And he is complaining about the same thing, about his first letters not being replied to. So it may have been a general policy, because it is not unknown for people to, a small militia to get together to try and free people who have been pressed. So, yeah, there may have been some keep the pressed people isolated for a while until they're used to being in the Navy. But I don't know that for a fact, it's just one of my theories. In 1803, he was pressed on board in June 1800, and then in April 1803, yes, he gets this document here. He's being discharged from the ship, and they no longer need him on board. So this document says that pleased to direct that none of His Majesty's officers, whether employed on board His Majesty's ship or on a service of raising men on shore, do impress the said Nichol Leith for the space of 14 days from the date hereof, unless he be found on board any ship or vessel, in which case the protection is not to be considered in force. I know it's terrible to put a slide up and then just read it, but here you go. I can see what's happening, I think, is that they're giving this and they're being kind enough to give the discharged person enough time to get home, say hello to their family before they are again free game for the press gangs. But if you find them working on board a ship, presumably they have already gone and spoken to their family, and they are again free to be picked up. Because press gangs would much rather have knowledgeable sea people than just landsmen, as they were called, so people inexperienced ships at all. It is a bit of a shame that this is given out to everybody, including Nichol, who needed to get onto a boat to get home, but he did manage to get home. I do know that. This document, you can see the use of the long S. It looks like an F, but not quite. If we zoom in a bit, you can see here. You can see here an actual F. There's a little thing here, and along here in space, you can see it looks like an F, but it hasn't got the little bar across there. So possibly the reason to stop using the long S was because it, if you're reading too quickly, you're not going to notice that, are you? When Nichol came home, he had with him a sword stick, so, looks like a walking stick. You pull the handle out, you've got a blade there. And the family story always was, it was the governor of Elsinore's sword staff. Elsinore, as you may or may not know, is where Shakespeare set Hamlet. And it's Helsingør, or sorry for my pronunciation, in Denmark, which is in this narrow strait here between it and Helsingborg in Sweden. And one of the tasks that HMS Leith was involved in was going into the Baltic and working there. So they would have travelled in this little gap here. And, if the governor's staff was available, he'd have been in a position to get it. But I have been in touch with national museums in both Denmark and Sweden, in Helsingør and Helsingborg, and nobody is aware of a governor's sword staff going missing at the time. So it seems awfully unlikely that it actually was the governor's sword staff. And the question that we'll never be able to have answered is, did Nichol know that it wasn't the governor's sword staff, or did he believe it was? Did somebody, he's having a game of cards or something, and somebody puts this up and says, see, this is valuable, this is the governor's sword staff. Yeah, who knows? Anyway, so he's home, and then a year later, him and his brother William are writing letters back from here. So this is a model of HMS Illustrious, and they both served on board that ship for a number of years. They both rose to the rank of quarter gunner, which is the person in charge of 4 guns, making sure that they're maintained properly, and then being in command of them when there's a fight going on. The story of how Nicholl came to be on HMS Illustrious is there's 2 family stories. One of them was that he was approached by a press gang who were going to press him, and he said, "No, you're not, I'm volunteering." And the other one was that he knew that there was press activity in the area, so he actually went to Stromness and volunteered on board, because volunteers are treated better than pressed men. So he did that. He also added 15 years to his age. Instead of being 29, he said he was 34. And that, according to family legend, is because older men didn't go up the mast and they had other tasks. So I haven't been able to confirm that as yet, but the search continues. Now here's an interesting bit of letter. William, the elder William, the father of these people, would send letters to them now and again. And obviously you get to know somebody's handwriting. This is a letter from William in a different hand. So there is what a letter written by William Sr. earlier on looked like. And there's the dear son part from this letter, and it looks different. Fortunately, there is Dear Cousins written by Christian Robertson, who was the wife of John Robertson, who was a lawyer and ship merchant in Stromness at the time. So the letter I'm showing here is, whilst John Robertson was still alive, but he was very unwell. Nobody knew that because he wanted to keep it quiet. And Christian Robertson, his wife, was doing all the work. So this letter is, just William Sr. telling Nicholl and William how things are going at home. Just a standard bit of letter. I assume his eyesight would have been failing here, so he's gone and got Christian Robertson to write the letter for him. Along the left there you can see a PS. This PS says, "If you have any cash, I think you should send it to your cousin John, as interest from your money may do as well as any other." Now this is obviously written by Christian Robertson, doing business for her husband John. And the question I would love to have answered, but we're never going to get answered at this stage, is did William dictate his letter and then they maybe sat around, had a chat, and Christian Robertson raised the thing about they could invest the money and say, "Well, that's a good idea, tell them that"? Or is it, and I think this one's more likely, William had gone home and Christian Robertson thought, here's a chance to drum up some more business, and wrote that in there. She was a very forceful lady apparently, so I shall leave it for the viewer to decide. Right, finally for this little talk here, James, brother of Nicholl and William, he had been pressed on board HMS Polyphemus. He was at the Battle of Trafalgar. He got his Trafalgar Medal and such like. But here in January 1813, he sent a letter home saying that he was, by this time he was working on board a merchant vessel. And in this letter he says he's on a trip to Jamaica. He says he will see his doctor in Jamaica and he'll maybe be able to sort him out. So we don't know what that was about. There's no mention in any of the letters, and none of the family stories had any mention. And he says he might decide to stay there, or if he doesn't, he'll see them again in 7 months' time. And that's the last we hear from him. So, did he just stay there and not send letters home? There had been some family tension over their parents' will, apparently. But, the tone of this letter is very polite. So he may have stayed in Jamaica and just not bothered to send letters home. Seems unlikely. He may have suffered from the illness that he was talking about and may not have arrived. And I can't find much about this James Leith because of this James Leith. James Leith at the time was the governor of Jamaica, but he was a different James Leith. And apparently not the nicest person when dealing with underlings. But it is another mystery I'm still looking into. Right, that's the highlights of my research. There's more information which I'll make more videos about, and we'll show you some of the artefacts we have from the time. But if you have enjoyed this little chat here, a like, a comment and or a subscribe would be awfully nice. I shall be back next week with something more, and in the meantime, have fun till then.